How can you know whether a life hack is worth trying? Joseph Riegel is here to help answer that question in the next segment in our Hacking Thursdays miniseries. He's an associate professor of communication studies at Northeastern University, and he recently published a new book, Hacking Life, Systematized Living and Its Discontents. Today we ask him a pretty big question. How can you tell if a piece of advice is valuable or not?
This is definitely one of the puzzles of modernity of the past couple of decades. We think that with all the science and technology we have out there, things are going to be so much certain. We'll have the right answer. But instead, we find ourselves very confused and perplexed, like, is coffee good for us or not? Is wine good for us or not? Is chocolate good for us or not? And this is what people are trying to deal with. And Lifehacker response is to say, well, I'm going to experiment with myself. And I can understand why they can do that and why they want to do that, but it's not necessarily an easy solution. And I think we do have to be skeptical and we do have to look to the science, but we also need to appreciate that a lot of things appear as pseudoscience. So one of the things I note in the book and kind of point fun at is one of the productivity hacks that lifehacker.com has suggested is that if you want to go to a meeting and be focused, you should drink a lot of water and then hold your urine so that you won't nod off or fall asleep because you're so dedicated to not wetting yourself. And that was based on some pretty weak science. And in fact, science, social science, medical science in general is facing this conundrum of the replicability crisis. A lot of the science out there is rather weak. And there's a lot of woo and pseudoscience about what's being reported out there. And one of the examples I talk about in the book is Amy Cuddy's posture effect. She had a very popular TED Talk. And she actually offered this idea of taking an expansive posture as a way to boost your confidence and get jobs and all this sort of thing as a life hack in her TED Talk.
I did that actually. Sorry, I did that to get this job. And then this job taught me that wasn't actually true.
Yeah, well, it's some elements were true and some elements weren't so true, but the science ended up being a lot more complicated than people were taking it for. And people, I think, pick up on some of this stuff as a little bit glib. And in doing so, I think we make it really overly complicated.
So then what are people to do with all these scientific crises? If we can't root this stuff in science, it was funny when you mentioned the holding in urine thing to stay awake during meetings. I literally do that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how unscientific it is or isn't. I don't know how replicable it is, but it kind of works for me. And I found working on this podcast, we talk about a lot of different productivity tips, and some just work for me and others don't, even if they are scientifically proven to work for people. So were you able to find any correlation between what works for whom or how to assess that?
It's difficult. And I don't want to tell people, for instance, I talk about this with respect to you feel a cold coming on, what do you do? Some people swear by their zinc lozenges. Like I take zinc lozenges when I feel a cold coming on. And I know I've looked at all the research. It's fairly marginal. But I feel like it works for me. My spouse, she drinks her hot toddy, which is like a booze, lemon, honey concoction, and she feels that wards off her colds. And that's understandable. Like you don't want to have a cold, so you want to do what you can do. But the virtue of both of those treatments is that they're low cost and low risk. And so in a sense, they're really harmless. And so I think we just need to be a bit pragmatic, and we see these various proposals out there, how we have to change our lives. The life hacking response tends to be extreme because they want to be optimal and super efficient. And instead, I end up offering the suggestion that, let's be practical, let's be pragmatic. Let's understand what they're telling us, what their motives might be, who benefits, and let's often adopt the path of moderation. In my book, I talk about a lot of life hackers, and they go to these extremes, and they end up realizing hey, the middle way, the moderate path was actually what they were looking for the whole time. One of the things I really loved about Michael Pollan's books about food, The Omnivore's Dilemma, and some of his subsequent books, is he was able to come up with this wonderful little maxim about eating and diet. It was something like, eat food, not too much, mostly greens or mostly vegetables.
Plants. Yes, I love that one.
Mostly plants. There you go. And so he was able to take this whole thing that's very much, again, similar to what's prompting us to look to life hacking for solutions with respect to health. To take all of this, the latest headline says, do this, do that, eat this, eat that, all these fad diets are hitting us. And he was able to distill it into some very simple, moderate, practical common sense advice. And I wish I had come up with something that pithy for each one of my chapters, but I wasn't able to do so. But still, I think that's the sort of solutions we should be looking for.
The key takeaway, if a life hack won't hurt you, then why not try it out?